If you're a pre-med student looking to get into medical school, I've written a book all about it. It's called From Pre-Med to Med Student. It's available on Amazon.com. It covers everything from the MCAT to secondary applications to your essay to interviews, kind of everything you need to know in a comprehensive book. So check it out. It's available on Amazon.com, From Pre-Med to Med Student. Hey everyone, how's it going? I know it's been a while since I posted, but just been going through this last stretch with the human body block, and it's finally over. I just finished my anatomy final today and I think it went well. So I wanted to make a video that goes over some tips that I had for students who are probably entering anatomy for the first time in medical school. I didn't take anatomy before I entered medical school, so I had to kind of learn how to study anatomy, and that was its own thing. So I hope you get a lot out of these tips that I'm about to show you. So here are 5 things that you should do if you're trying to succeed in anatomy in medical school. Number 1, you should definitely go to the lab. I can't stress this enough. Actually touching the cadaver, dissecting, looking at structures, trying to figure out what structure is what in relation to what. All of that requires a lot of time in the lab and dedicated study time with the cadaver and not a book. Early on in the semester, I kind of had to learn this quickly by realizing that I didn't know what structures looked like when people just pointed at them on the cadaver. So I went to lab a lot more often. So that's definitely my number 1 tip, is use your lab and make sure you go to the lab and look at the cadaver. And also what you can do to supplement that is you can go to lab with a sheet of structures that you probably will be tested on and try to test yourself or a friend with those structures. Point at it, give them a minute to figure out what it is, and then test each other that way. And if you do that, you're gonna realize that you understand how a structure looks like in relation to another structure, and it'll help you in the long run. When you're in the cadaver lab, you have to make sure that you're looking at multiple bodies and you're comparing what a structure looks like on one body versus the next. And that's going to be a big deal because when you're doing your lab practical, you may not have the same body that's tagged. So you want to know what a structure looks like on different bodies. Now, this is obviously going to vary based on medical school and how many cadavers you have. In my medical school, we had plenty of cadavers to go around and to see what one particular structure looked like on different bodies. You're going to want to go to the anatomy lab at a bare minimum of 2 times a week. So my second tip for students entering anatomy in medical school is to pick up a good resource for looking up anatomical terms, anatomical parts. So your resource could be printed or it could be online, but I highly recommend getting an online resource because it really makes searching for items much easier and more efficient. So I have 2 resources that I really want to share with you that helped me during anatomy. One of them is called Anatomy by Rohen, a photographic atlas. And this book is great because it actually shows you pictures of the cadaver, and it will have tags on it, and you will be able to study from this book and understand what the relations look like, what the structure should look like on a cadaver. And it's kind of a quick way to prep before a lab exam when you may not have access to the lab, because you're actually looking at cadaver images instead of illustrations. But I would also recommend getting a resource which has illustrations. So that's my second recommendation, which is Netter. I know a lot of people use Netter. So Atlas of Human Anatomy, you can get the hardcover version or the soft cover or the online. I got the hardcover version, and this one came with online access, which is actually what I used for a majority of the time. I barely opened the hardcover version, but if you do get the online access, definitely use it, because you could go online and just search up a structure like brachial plexus or something, and it will come up immediately and you can see the Netter plate. So I highly recommend using the online resource that comes with Netter. And a third resource, I know this is gonna sound a little bit cliche, but is YouTube and Google. You can Google a lot of things. I use Wikipedia a lot for trying to understand what a structure looks like, what its function is, innervation, vasculature, etc. Those things you can easily find by searching online, and sometimes if you need more nuanced information, that's when you can use your school's textbook or something like Netter. My third tip for students in anatomy and medical school is to focus on structural relationships. And this is really important because when I first started, I wasn't doing this, and once I started doing it, things became a lot easier. But essentially, if you're looking at arteries, veins, nerves, muscles, all of these have relationships to another. One might be lateral, one might be posterior, inferior, etc. You want to know those relationships, and if you know those relationships, it will make locating that particular structure that much easier. This takes time to do, but if you can use your school textbook, use Netter, talk to friends, talk to your faculty, figure out what the common relationships are between structures and remember those, that will help you so much when it comes to not only effectiveness at finding something, but efficiency and speed as well. And also it's going to help you with written exams because you'll be able to know if that relationship is part of that that word problem or something like that. So definitely focus on structural relationships. My fourth tip for students studying anatomy in medical school is to use Anki. I used Anki throughout anatomy and it helped me a ton. I used 3 features in Anki. So that's the close feature, the regular card, and the image occlusion. You could look up how to do image occlusion on YouTube. There's plenty of videos on it, but essentially what you can do is pull up or take a screenshot of an image and then blank out the names of the structures, and then you can test yourself that way using Anki. And it's really effective, especially if you're doing it for like a quick study before an exam. I definitely recommend using Anki throughout your semester. It's definitely going to reinforce a lot of that knowledge of vasculature and structures that you will need to know for your lab practicals and your written exams. Also, one tip with Anki, try to organize your decks by the compartment or the area of the body that you're working on. This way, like let's say you realize that you're not doing well on questions involving the head and neck, you can quickly click on head and neck and then study head and neck instead of having to go through a whole deck that's covering lower limb, upper limb, etc. So try to organize your Anki decks based off of the compartment or area of the body that you're learning. My fifth tip when it comes to studying anatomy in medical school is to study with friends. This is definitely going to help you a lot because a friend might look at a structure or come to the conclusion that it is a certain structure in a different way than you are. And that might be a better way of doing it or a more efficient way of doing it than the way you are doing it. And you're only going to find out those techniques if you work with several people in a group setting. At least several times a week, you want to meet with a group of friends and either hit the anatomy lab together or just talk about relationships of structures. You're going to realize that there are many different ways of thinking about things, and you're going to be able to use all of those different relationships to really expand your anatomical knowledge. And a bonus tip is to use plain pen and paper. And what I mean by this is sometimes you're going to want to draw out relationships, you're going to want to draw out arteries and branches, and when you put pen to paper, it's a different feeling and it really helps instill that knowledge in your head and keep it in there. Especially when it comes to things like vessels and vasculature. So definitely use pen and paper, but don't overemphasize it. You can use Anki and digital tools as a majority of your bread and butter. That's what I did. But definitely supplement with pen and paper when needed. I found that it helped a lot with vasculature. Other students might use it for something else. Bonus tip number 2 for studying anatomy is to know your bones. We all get caught up in muscles, vessels, nerves, things like that, but bones are actually really important landmarks, and they can be used to really understand how certain muscles work, or when you pull on a certain muscle, how is it going to affect your body. If you can understand bones, especially foramen in the skull, where cranial nerves are entering and exiting, that's really going to help you hone in on a certain anatomical relationship. So knowing your bones and studying your bones will certainly supplement your anatomical knowledge as a whole. Thanks again for watching, guys, and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.